Hey there. Go ahead and grab a chair, a cold one, sit back, and relax. This is the Fireside Chatot.
What is up, everyone? Welcome into another Fireside Chatot. I am Wildcat Dad 17, and tonight I am, of course, joined by our normal host, Dinho and Astro. But more importantly, more fun, we have Greg from It's Super Effective. Tell everyone hi, Greg.
Hi.
How are you tonight?
I just did this 3-hour nightmare podcast, so
Definitely not the same
I'm a little off kilter, but I'm sure this will be fun.
This will be fun. We'll keep it short for you. You can't say we didn't warn you before when I asked you that we were long format.
I didn't say it wasn't warned. That has no bearing on my judgment.
Hello, Astro. Hello, Dinho. How are you guys doing?
We're doing well. Well,
yeah.
I hope we're both doing well.
So tonight for Fireside Chatot, we're going to keep things a little more chill, and we're going to get to know Greg a little bit. Greg is one of the co-hosts of an amazing general Pokemon podcast. It's super effective. Has a lot of fun hot takes, especially around Pokemon Go. But if you want to hear those, you should listen to this week's episode. So let's talk a little bit with Greg and start to get to understand, his Pokemon journey as well as just his general podcasting journey, because it's not just It's Super Effective that you do, Greg. You host another podcast. You want to tell us about your secondary podcast?
So I am on a actual play podcast called Very Random Encounters. So we play pen and paper RPGs in which we've randomly determined as many things as possible, including characters, names, villains, places, and other wilder stuff, and it all comes together to be a very random encounter. Yeah, so I do storytelling, basically, is the other podcast. Each season is a different game system. So like our first season is Dungeons and Dragons, and then we quickly went to all the other amazing games that are out there. So we always tell people, like, if there's a genre that you like, we have a season that covers it. So just start there, because none of the seasons are they're not really linked. We put in Easter eggs every so often to make them sort of linked. Like if you're a longtime listener, you'll hear things like, oh ho! But generally each season is its own unique story with its own unique characters.
Astro, I know you've recently got into Dungeons and Dragons.
I have.
Yeah, I figured your ears would perk up when you actually heard what the other podcast was. That's why I was like, I'm going to wait and make sure he hears this tonight.
Well, because I just found, maybe a month or so ago, a podcast called Join the Party. They do very similar to what you said your other podcast was. So I'm really enjoying it because you hear them play through the game, but you still hear the mechanics of the game. So you're learning as they're telling stories, and and you get, like, as a listener, like, super invested. I'm like, I think like 27 episodes into the campaign, and it's like I feel like I'm part of the game. Like it's awesome. If
our longest season is 21 episodes.
21.
We do a lot in a short amount of time.
Is each episode 3 hours?
Nope. We have a hard stop at an hour because we feel that people benefit from having media literacy. So there is what I call the critical role factor. So we know that people only have 20 minutes to listen to a podcast roughly every day. So the longer your format is, the less time they have for other things. And so we made a very strong determination that we wanted to tell our stories in an appropriate for us time frame that would still give people time to listen to what other people are doing, that would let them still do a Critical Role if they wanted, still do another podcast if they wanted, because really it helps people to get a strong taste of a lot of different things. So we were pretty much like never longer than an hour. Never. It's also really exhausting to act for a very long time. It's not like just having a conversation. It's, you're performing and doing a bunch of things, and that's really exhausting. So it's just for the listener's sake, for our sake, we have pretty much a hard stop. Most of our episodes come in between half an hour to 45 minutes.
Cool.
And then
so I know additionally, not only do you do a podcast about RPGs, you are a game designer as well, right? You actually do and create your own stories and game designs for RPGs.
So I wrote a game called Glitter Hearts, which is a magical transforming heroes game. So Sailor Moon, Power Rangers, all of those magical transforming genres. So I wrote that, and that's for sale. And then because of Very Random Encounters, Simon & Schuster approached us and said, we want you to write a book for D&D. We can't say it's for D&D because we don't have the copyright. So it's a generic fantasy setting, but it's a big book of random encounters. It's called the Ultimate Random Encounter Book. So it's for DMs to be able to just pull something out of the book instead of having to really think through. So we wrote that. And then of course I have a million things half written. So we'll see whatever happens with those. But yeah, the big thing that people probably know me for my book wise is Glitter Hearts, because that's the one I wrote and kickstarted and found all the artists for and did the most work for.
And I know you're going to Gamescom this year, correct?
I am going to Gen Con.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
Yep.
I assume you're going to be there primarily promoting your RPGs and other wonderful things you're doing in that space.
Gen Con for the most part is a vacation for me. I mean, I'll go visit my publisher. I'll go visit with people who want to meet with me, but it's also for me to go and see what's happening in the game space. Meet my friends who I only see at cons. So spend time with them. Actually get to play games with them that aren't recorded, aren't for consumption. That's just us sitting around just playing a game that we don't have to worry about all the things you have to worry about when you're performing for people. And then, yeah, I'll meet a publisher. I'll meet people. I'll sign books, whatever happens business wise, but mostly Gen Con's vacation time. Like we're not doing a panel. We're just there to be and see what's happening in sort of the TTRPG / board game.
Awesome. So we're a Pokemon podcast, so I guess I should ask you a little bit about your Pokemon relationship here. So you are not the what I would call average Pokemon fan.
I was an adult.
Yes, you are. I didn't want to say you were old, but you.
No, I wasn't. I mean, I was 28 when the games came out.
How did you get into Pokemon when it was, at the time, especially, it was this is a kid's game kind of thing?
So it was before it was labeled as a kid's game. So what happened was, the special editions of Star Wars were coming out. And so my brother and I were going to the Mall of America to wait in line for tickets. So we were going to get there. I think we got there at like 4 a.m. to sit for when box office opened, which was like at 1. And I said to myself, well, I want something to play while I'm there on my Game Boy. And I want an RPG. And I want something that's new. And I saw an ad that was just very basic. It was a very basic collect monsters in this JRPG thing. And I'm like, well, that looks fun. And the monsters look cute. Yeah, I'll try it. I'll just buy it. And then I'll sit and play it. And if it's good, it's good. And if it's bad, I had something to do while I was in line. And then I moved on. And it was surprisingly very good. And I was hooked into the series immediately. I thought the storyline was pretty good. I thought all of the creature designs were great. The game was horribly broken. half the things didn't work the way they said they were working. I'm like, well, it's a buggy game, but there's so much here that is charming.
But did you find Mew under the truck?
Absolutely. And then I released it because it should be free.
There you go. Exactly. Dinho, Astro, any questions here? I've been dominating the conversation. Sorry, Dinho, what do we got here? Ask us some questions.
Yeah, so I know that he mentioned earlier Emerald was his favorite main series game. So what is it about that specific, I guess, game that's better than the rest? Because I never actually played it.
Gen 3, I will stand on this hill forever that Gen 3 is the most important gen. Because Gen 2 was clearly written as the ending of the series.
I did not know that.
You can tell by the way the game was created. You can tell that they just recycled the plot line. You can tell how thin the actual region is. Kanto is tacked on as a nostalgia go back to the first game because they were changing from Game Boy to Game Boy Advance, right? Like those two systems didn't talk to each other. And so there was no plan from the company's perspective to move past Gen 2. So when the Game Boy Advance came out, they literally had a choice to make, which was forsake the first two games and make something that can't talk to them, that's completely new, or end the series. And obviously it makes them a lot of money, so they weren't going to end the series. So Gen 3 is the actual leap of faith to say, we're going to jump to new systems. We're going to literally have a game that doesn't even have most of Gen 1 and Gen 2 Pokemon in it, except in the Safari Zone. We are going to create something completely new. We're going to create a storyline that is very themed. It's very themed against the world. Hoenn is exactly what the game's theme is, which is half land, half water. And we're going to forsake allowing people to take their Pokemon forward because you can't. And it was a huge risk. And to me, that signifies their design change of, we now know this is a long-term series, and we are now going to start writing these as long-term games. And so Gen 3 is so important in the fact that it's that leap of faith, in the fact that it is the first time they got really deliberate with their design, and in the intentionality of, we're going to fix all the problems that existed in Gen 1 and Gen 2 that we just didn't really bother fixing, because we are now going to do something that's long-lasting. And while Emerald and Ruby are good, there's no post-game. There's nothing to do really at the end of those games. What Emerald does is it created what all third series do. It's the same plot line, but it had a brilliant after game. It added more Pokemon in. It added connectivity to the GameCube stuff. It fixed a bunch of problems that were bugs. It really just took the thing and said, we're going to make an enhanced version that gives you a lot to do after the game is over. So, like, if I'm going to play one from the series, I will play Emerald simply because, like, the Battle Frontier, that whole section is just super fun to play.
Bring back the Battle Frontier. Bring it back.
I'm still so
cowards.
mad for Omega Ruby.
That's interesting. I actually never knew that. That's like kind of like where it was supposed to end, and that's kind of like
it was supposed to. They wrote
wow.
They wrote Gen 2 as the end of the series. Like it was supposed to be the game they were going out on.
Which is also the reason we'll probably never go back to another region in any future game, because there's no reason to them for them to. That was a nostalgia trip to pull in and try to get people back in Silver Gold. That was the selling point of Silver Gold, really, was you've got a new game plus the old.
There are reasons to go back, right? Like there are reasons to include them, but I think the lesson they learned is there needs to be a better reason than what they've provided. And there really hasn't been one. They haven't sort of written a story that touches on that, but given what's happening with Scarlet and Violet, it is very likely that we could see a trip to some version of Hisui. Because of the themes with that game, we know you can bring Hisui and Pokemon into that game. There may be a version of going to a region because that fits the storyline. I wouldn't write it out.
I would love that. Especially as much as I love Legends Arceus, I would love that. Astro, any questions?
Yeah, actually. And it has nothing to do with Pokemon now that I know about other things.
You notice I hid that
Um,
fact all through last podcast for you.
It's funny
Yeah.
because I don't know if before you ask Astro, I know because you mentioned Dungeons and Dragons, and the only reason why that was brought up to me again was because I watched Stranger Things, and then in Stranger Things they were playing that, and I actually never played
Oh yeah.
that game. I'm like, this kind of intrigues me a little bit. I'm like, I kind of like want to play it and see how that is. So I don't know, like maybe I'll learn something while Astro asks.
Yeah. Well, so my question was more, I guess, not so much about gameplay, but more about, I guess, the community around it. So one of the things I like about Join the Party is they're gender neutral.
Mhm.
They're very, I would say, modern with their gameplay. And it's real world, what's going on, real people, opposed to the what tends to be, I guess, more, I don't want to say homophobic.
You can. There's a lot of homophobic crap out there.
Where, like, I guess your standard Dungeons and Dragons stories tend to not be very open to other sexualities or other types of races. There's actually, I think, another podcast. Um, they were 3 African American people. Uh, they do like a whole thing based around like African mythology and stuff like that. Um, it's actually, it's a really good podcast. I found it from them. But um, how is it being, you know, in that sphere, um, where it could be a lot more inclusive, um, or exclusive?
So our podcast is a very, 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 very gay podcast. And we know that shuts a lot of doors, right? Like it just does. But one of the reasons why we make very random counters, and one of the reasons why we tell the stories that we do, is we're trying to tell stories that we never had. And I think the problem is not just in D&D, it is media that still thinks and still believes that white straight men are the only paying audience. And if you piss them off just because they're very loud, you're going to automatically lose money. And every creator, when money is on the line, is going to be extremely conservative about what they do to risk their income stream. And quite frankly, straight white men have a lot more resources and a lot more opportunities. You can be a bad straight white man and still be given something that a top tier minority would have to fight for, because it's just the way the world is right now. And so there's a lot of people who are really trying to change the media outlook and the media thing. The problem is when you are a minority, you also are seen as having a minority audience, right? Like, one of the most frustrating things is, and this is feedback I hear all the time, is, we as minorities have always had to find ourselves in your stories. We have always had to do the work of making a connection. Like, I can watch a Marvel movie and I am nowhere in those films. There's not a gay person to be found. And if we are, we're in the background, so it's easy to cut out for markets where it's still illegal for me to exist. And so we have to do the work. We have to do the work to connect to your story. We have to find the universality. And what's frustrating is the feedback we often get is it doesn't cater to you, and most of you aren't willing to do the work that we've had to do our entire lives. Our stories are just as relevant to you as your stories are to us. It's just that most people aren't willing. When you have 90% of things that cater to you, most people aren't going to be like, well, I want to try that 10% thing. Nah, I got 90% over here. Why would I ever look at that 10% thing? And that's why it's really hard to change, because the numbers are never in our favor. And D&D has, in its core, built in a very strong white colonial viewpoint. I mean, it is a Eurocentric conquer, go into a dungeon that's somebody's holy temple, rob it, and take the crap out and kill the natives that were around it. I mean, that is the game. And you can easily tell stories out of it, but unless you're focusing on it, you just go along with it, because that's what you're fed. That's what the game is. And it's fine in your home games. Like, play the game that you want to play the game that your group is happy with, but without sort of a concerted effort to change the media landscape, it will never change. And that's one of the issues I have with a lot of things out there, is they just don't try to change the landscape. It's one of the reasons why on Super Effective, I talk about my husband a lot, and I get a lot of hate. You can go into the reviews. There was just one in March that literally calls me a horrible person that should never be allowed around
I
children.
remember that one, and that pissed me off very badly.
But that is my life. That is just existing. I've said this before. I'll say it again. To be openly gay is to invite violence from strangers into your life. It is just, it is hand in hand. People do not want you to exist. And it is important that I normalize the fact that I am married. I am married to a man. We have been together for 30 years. We've been together longer than Pokemon has existed. So, like, it needs to be normalized, and it takes actual conscious effort to constantly normalize it. So, like, there are a lot of great podcasts out there that are trying to do the hard work. The problem is, a lot of the podcasts are kind of doing the work telephone wise. They don't invite minority people who have the experience. They take the experience of minority and then translate it through their filter, which sometimes is great, sometimes is really bad.
That's fair. Now, I have an important question about you. You mentioned your husband. Does your husband play Pokemon Go with you, or Pokemon with you?
Every once
What
in a while.
about D&D?
Every once in a while.
That's good then. He's indulging your interest. But trust me, my wife is not a Pokemon fan. She does not like Pokemon, but she'll indulge me every so often. She's coming to Columbus with me. Look at there.
He played Sword and Shield. Every once in a while when the game look like, when he sees me playing, he's like, oh, this one looks fun, or I like the things that I'm saying, he'll play for a while. But we have similar interests in other areas, right? Like, we play Final Fantasy 14 together. Like, I just do a lot more of it than he has interest. Like, he has ADHD, so like complicated rules are just tough. So like board game nights are awful for him. Like, a complicated board game, I might as well be flaying his skin off. So, like, I go do the things that I enjoy, but we have plenty of nerd things that we do together, right? Like, we are very similar in our geekdom. We just express it in different ways.
Awesome. Well, Greg, I want to thank you for coming on tonight. We have kept you very late into the night, and it has been much appreciated.
I work from home. I just walk over to the bed. You can ask me more questions.
Okay, if you have a few more minutes, we'll take some more time here, Evyer.
Absolutely.
One of the things I know, and it's pretty obvious, the Pokemon Company in general, very similar to D&D, does not change quickly. I mean, how many years did it take us to get skin tones in the game? And even today, from an LGBTQ perspective, there's not a lot of representation in the games at all. I think Blanche was one of the first kind of representative things where it's like, oh yeah, Blanche is non-binary, and everyone's like, wait, what?
Yeah, and that
That
took a
took a while.
while.
Do you think do you foresee a company that says a conservative TCPI taking that leap anytime soon, or do you think this is still years in the making for us to finally get more representation there?
No company is not conservative. Nobody is not conservative when money is on the line, right? Like, you're not going to risk the bottom dollar. So they're going to make small incremental changes that don't result in backlash. And so, one, it is a system issue. Two, it is also when you have a global game, it's illegal. It's illegal for me to exist in a lot of countries in this world. And so you have to look at a global corporation going, is it worth cutting off 20 countries from our product to make a statement that affects a small group of people? Now, it's very important to that small group of people, but it is not a risk that any company is willing to make. They're just not. And they're not willing to cut off huge swaths of the population to make a statement. Like, we all know this is just part of who we are. Like, skin tone is easy because you are now matching a bunch of countries that you want to sell your game in. Sexuality? Nah.
Let's be honest. A lot of the girls' clothes in those games are better than the guys' clothes. Let me buy the girls' clothes as a male character. That's a tiny little start to giving us more options in the games.
Yeah, I mean, taking on gender norms is also a difficult thing in countries where gender norms are very strictly enforced, right? Like, gender norms and gender presentation is not a neutral statement. It's more neutral in America. It's more neutral in Japan. It is not neutral in a lot of places. And so you are unnecessarily inviting problems for the right reason, but they are never going to see that as necessary until it becomes a necessary factor in the market. Companies just are market driven. It is the nature of capitalism.
I mean, you look at Disney's a great example of this. Disney finally, against all odds, actually spoke up a little bit and said, "Oh, we screwed up," and the backlash they're facing in the state of Florida now because they decided to speak up. I mean, I know, Astro, you're a big Disney guy. I'm a big Disney guy. And seeing the way the government in Florida is going after them and trying to take Reedy Creek away from them because of it, I get what you're saying there. It takes the point you're making about companies needing to be conservative and showing it what happens when they're not.
Yeah, I mean, the Disney situation is a bad situation all around, right? Like, their support for us is mostly surface level, right? Like, I was
going to say
100%
tokenized
stand
support
behind.
is the word I would use.
No,
I think
it's not that bad. It's not that bad. It is like tokenism means it's a very specific thing, and they don't tend to do that anymore, right? Like, if you look at things from the 80s and 90s, that's really when LGBT tokenism was at the highest. Like, we were there to be killed so that the straight people learned a lesson about us being human, right? Like, those stories just aren't readily told anymore. But like, we were included to either be the sassy comedy to laugh at us. It was A Man in the Dress, which is always a comedy hit back in the day, or to teach people that, hey, these people are also human and you should have compassion. Like, the stories they're telling now are a little more complex, but the thing is, the world before rainbow capitalism was bleak. Like, I grew up in a very, very bleak world. I grew up in a world where you were thrown out of stores if you were obviously gay. Banks refused your money. You couldn't buy a house. You had to lie on applications. Like, it wasn't that long ago that like it was difficult for us to find a place to live in 96. We had to go to a gay paper and find a gay landlord who didn't have a problem with a gay couple moving into their house because there aren't other options. There weren't. And so rainbow capitalism is the changeover of we shun you and will not take your money to you are a functioning part of society and we will happily take your money. And that fundamental shift has been incredible. The amount in my lifetime, I never thought I would walk into a Target and see myself represented in any way, much less a big display saying buy our shit. Like, that was not a thing. That was never going to be a thing. Like, we were still being hunted and killed in the 80s. In 91, people like we had to force the police to solve a serial killer who was killing us in Minneapolis. Like, they had to be shamed into taking our case seriously. That was 1991. So Disney's in a situation where they are conservative. They are beginning to understand that the new generation, the kids, see a multicultural world. And so for them to still be engaged with their product has to reflect the world that they're living in. What's happening now is all of the attacks that are happening on my community are to undo that worldview. They want the next generation to see us as a problem again. And so Disney is in a tough situation because all corporations are reactionary. So right now they're reacting to a climate of Gen Z and before who have a multicultural view, who aren't just seeing white faces in power. They are seeing multi-skinned people. They are seeing a multicultural global world. And so their product is going to reflect that. Unfortunately, we have an active base that wants to hold on to a white supremacist view that undoes that global viewpoint. And we can talk at length about the ills and pros of globalization. Like, globalization hurts the common person, right? But it is also a necessity to actually try to save the planet on some level.
Just a little bit.
We can't be separate anymore because we're killing ourselves, but also in not being separate anymore, we have hurt the very people who have to do the work. Like, it is an incredibly complicated problem.
Absolutely. So we are coming to an end, but I want to give a chance, go around the horn, one more question each. So we'll start Astro. One more question here.
I guess it's a question. So you brought up you just brought up a point that kind of hit close when you were talking about walking into Target and seeing advertisements to see, you like you said, you saw yourself in an ad in Target that wasn't like, oh, we're just putting it here because we have to. And I've noticed that like Target's been very big on all of that. Like, just even the whole model aspect, like you're not seeing, your typical twig girl, you're seeing an actual woman. But do you look at that as like an accomplishment, like I don't want to say an accomplishment, but like a step forward, or do you look at that as someone taking advantage of what's going on to make money off of?
Yes.
Both.
So the tough thing is, it's like industrialization, right? Like, people forget that America had sweatshops just like China does, right? We just did it a lot earlier, and we all think it was fine at the Industrial Revolution. It wasn't fine back then, but it was a step of progress. And so what we're seeing now is we need to normalize these things so that people come to expect it. And part of the normalization process is there's going to be tokenism, there's going to be cash-ins, but ultimately these are stepping stones to fix the problem, right? Like they have to see the value in it to keep doing it, and people need to become used to seeing it so they start asking for it. Like as it's weird because as like more African Americans are on TV, people get used to seeing them and they get used to having that as part of their day-to-day process. And so it's tough because it is crass commercialism, right? Like they are taking things from people to make money off it, but it also has a secondary effect of normalizing those things so that people can come in and say, we're at this point, let's build from here. Let's build something better because we've gotten you here. It is not an all or nothing process. It has to be stepping stones. So yeah, like having plus size models, which is just a dumb way of saying it because they are normal sized people. Like there's nothing plus about them, does help people get used to the idea that these people are worth celebrating, even if it is a cash grab. It's both. It is just I support it in the fact that it gets us to where we want to be. Like this isn't like we can't just stop here.
Yeah.
like the idea isn't like, oh, we put one person there and we're done. Like it has to
Can
continue.
we get
Yeah.
big and tall in stores just like plus size women's clothes? That's all I'm saying, y'all. As a
Well,
fat
the
man, I
problem
need
is
clothes from Walmart just the same as I do a fat man specialty store.
the problem is that they've hidden it in vanity sizing.
Yeah.
Right? Like men's vanity sizing started 15 years ago because they realized that the sizing that they're selling doesn't fit the average customer, but they want men to feel good about the size that they're in. So they started vanity sizing, which they'd done for women all along. So it's there. It's just hidden now.
Yep, absolutely. Dinho, your last question for the chat talk tonight.
Yeah. I mean, it's more of a. I guess it can get a question out of it or not, but kind of going with what Astro said a little bit with the whole Target thing. But I know that you mentioned that it was a lot harder for you or back in the day, like in the 80s or 90s, to I guess look for stuff or be out of like who you really are. Um, I'm not sure like how this goes, but maybe can like one of you guys can relate to it as well. I know that for us playing Pokemon, right, we're adults. I don't know if you guys ever been kind of like made fun of for playing Pokemon. But I know recently, like you'd be surprised like how many people actually play it. But there's other people like you're actually going to Ohio to play Pokemon, like what? Because funny story, I didn't tell you guys, but I actually have my cousin's baby shower is this weekend, and I completely forgot, and they're like shaming me because I'm going to like play Pokemon over going to that. So I mean, they always make fun of me for playing, but I don't know if like any of you guys have ever like been made fun of, like I don't know, random people, like you're ashamed to like I don't know, play Pokemon Go in public. I know some people are like afraid to do that or admit that they play it.
Societal norms suck.
Yeah.
And the enforcement of societal norms of what's acceptable and unacceptable exist, right? Like, as I say to people, you will go sit in a stadium to watch people throw a ball around, and you will do that over other things, right? Like, if you break your thing down into its most basic thing, it also sounds stupid. I do what makes you happy, but stop trying to make your thing my thing. Like, let me be happy. I think that again, the biggest issue that happened, it still happens, is the tying of a thing to your identity. Like that has been a very strong current in the 2000s of you're a football person, you're a Super Bowl person, you're a Mac person, you're a PC person, you shop here. Because what happens is when we really start getting into identity politics that are not just a gay issue, it is an overall issue. It is a way for people to establish tribes, right? Like we are herd animals at our essence. And so it is natural to be like, oh, I don't feel comfortable talking to these people because they won't understand. Guess what? They don't have to understand, right? Like, I'll tell you now at age 52, wasting your time on what other people think is exhausting. And I had to deal with the shattering of every expectation. When you come out, when you say to people, especially there was no marriage, there were no families, there was nothing. Like, I am giving up on everything that you think I should have, right? Like, gay marriage was not even a conversation when I came out. It was a non-existent. It was my parents saying, we don't want you to be killed. Like, that was one of their concerns. We do not want you to be killed. You have to be safe. Like, and it takes just being unashamed and saying, yeah, this is what I do. This makes me happy. And if you cannot respect the thing that makes me happy, you do not need to be in my life. I don't shit on the things that make you happy. You don't get to shit on the things that make me happy. And if that is a step too far for you, then we do not have to have a relationship. You can think it's weird. Fine. I think whatever you're into is weird. But I don't give you shit about it. Just because you found a lot more people who like it, there are millions of people who play this. Pokemon makes billions.
Number one
year.
media franchise in the world.
And it's
Just
not
because you don't like
5-year-olds
it,
buying it, they don't
fine.
have jobs.
Exactly.
Yeah. It is like, it is ingrained to us as children to fit in because that's how you stay safe. But at some point, like, I always say to straight people, it is clear you have never had to struggle with your identity because you have to learn to get rid of that crap. Otherwise, you will just not survive. Right? Like, you have to learn to be able to stay. I know you are going to want to hurt me, and literally, you say this to me every day, but I have to be happy. I cannot be miserable anymore. And I also cannot let you make me miserable anymore.
So that leads me into a kind of a good ending question here. So you are a fairly successful podcaster on multiple fronts. You also are very unashamed of you. What advice would you give to a member of the LGBT community that isn't necessarily comfortable yet in front of a microphone or in front of a YouTube channel that wants to get into it? Give me 2 pieces of advice you would give someone that wants to become a creator that is also part of this community that can really help them kind of take that step.
Everybody sucks at the start. Everybody.
Yep.
Does.
Amen.
It is a skill. Also, try it. This is not for everybody. This hobby sometimes is not fun. Doing this for hours is sometimes not fun.
Mm-hmm.
It is work. It is a job. And if it's not a job that you want to do, don't do it. But the one thing I always tell people is nobody is you. The thing that you're bringing to the table is you. And the less you're yourself, the less interesting whatever you're making is going to be. Because there are 50 billion people who know a lot about Pokemon. There are people who know way more than I do about this series. But I have a very unique lens, and I am not ashamed to to tell you how I view this series through my life experiences. That's what I bring to the table. And you can, like, there are 50 million actual play podcasts out there, right? Like, I started in Mythical, which was Pokemon D&D. It still exists out there. And then we moved to Very Random Encounters. But in each of those, I had a different story that I wanted to tell. That was my story. And so you also have to define success as how you want it to be success. Like, if you're expecting to be rich, this is not it. This ain't it. If you're expected to be super popular,
Not at
this
all.
ain't it. But if you want to create something that that you can find an audience that will enjoy you and enjoy what you bring, and that's enough for you, then go for it.
Well, that's a great place to end. Greg, I want to thank you immensely for coming on. This has been... Oh, Astro's holding up a finger. I said no more things. I said no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's called Mythical. The first season's called Dungeons and Dragonites. There's 6 seasons. It ends, unfortunately, poorly, because it just never got finished. And then there wasn't monetary support to keep it finished. Like, we needed some hefty cash to be able to get it, and it just didn't happen, which is fine. But yeah, there's 6 seasons of it. All of them are really fun. I am the DM for all of those seasons. The stories get pretty wild. But yeah, check it out. It's called Mythical. You can find it. It's still published.
We will get that in show notes because Astro's going to go be looking for it, and Greg will send it to the tweet.
I did a lot of work for that show, so you can find my work on the website too. Like, I mean, come to Gen Con. I don't know. I do one shots a lot. Usually I'm playtesting my own stuff. I do a bunch of stuff for charity every once in a while. So, like, I usually put on Twitter, like, if I've got something that's going on and need players, I'll put it on.
That's a great
So
time to mention.
my Twitter.
Where can we find you at on Twitter so we can get more information about Greg?
Find me at White Wing on Twitter. And I link pretty much everywhere else from there. It's just the easiest.
Awesome. Well, Greg, you are welcome on this show anytime. It's been an absolute blast. Astro,
thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for coming. Astro, anything else to say for the night?
Like, before you stop again.
No.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It's like more we can learn.
Look, if you want me to go off for hours on end, I clearly have no problem talking.
we see that.
Clearly have
Dinho,
no
That's
problem.
awesome.
Thank you for joining us again tonight.
Yep. Thank you.
Well, I think with that does conclude another Fireside Chatot. The time has come and gone. And until next time, good night, good luck, and get good.
Get good, noobs.
Thank you for listening to the Fireside Chatot, and until next time, good luck and get good.